on the basis of media reports. It acts on the basis of actual firm requests that are brought to it by the parties. Certainly the members of the Security Council are aware that there is a different group besides the Gaddafi government that now purports to be the government of Libya. They've seen that particular documentation. As of right now, there hasn't been any change of the credentials of the delegated Libyan representatives at the United Nations. That's something that may come up as an issue down the line. But at this point, the status quo remains where it had been before.
One other interesting development, an EU official saying Libya has invited the UN, or at least wants the UN, to appoint a fact-finding mission that will be given unfettered access to Libya to investigate the violence. Have you received an official request? Would there be any appetite for that?
I wouldn't say that we received an official request. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon did speak on Sunday with the Foreign Minister of Libya, Moussa Koussa, and the Libyan Foreign Minister did make their concerns known. At the same time, what our priorities on the ground are, first and foremost, we want to have a humanitarian assessment team go into Tripoli, and the Foreign Minister did grant permission for that team to come in. But as of today, Tuesday, we're still not inside Tripoli, and we're still hoping that the arrangements can be worked out so that we can assess what the humanitarian needs are. The other UN team that may go down the line is that the Human Rights Council has authorized a further investigation into the human rights violations that have reportedly taken place in Libya. So hopefully that inquiry will be coming in the near future.
Farhan Haq, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all for the moment from Washington. Let's take it back to Doha.
At least 3 inmates have been killed and dozens more injured during clashes with police at a prison in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. Around 2,000 prisoners have joined protests across the country, calling for the removal of President Ali Abdullah Saleh. AlJazeera's Hashim Mahabara has more.
Plumes of smoke billowing from the central prison in the capital. Violence broke out when inmates started chanting anti-government slogans and denouncing President Saleh. Security forces fired tear gas. The whole area is sealed off by security forces amid mounting tension in the capital. The popular movement for change has entered its 4th week, and the resolve of the protesters remains strong.
I think after Tunisia and Egypt, we are very optimistic that change will come to Yemen. I mean, after 30 years as a president on Yemen, it's time to change.
They know that the fall of the regime may depend on a complex interplay of factors, like the role of the army, the tribes, and the opposition. However, they are very confident that they continue to inspire people to take to the streets. They might be able to achieve their goal in the weeks to come.
Calls for dislodging the president are widely ignored here in the parliament. This session is boycotted by the opposition, which accuses the parliament of rubber-stamping presidential decrees and decisions. President Saleh's General Congress Party is already showing cracks. At least 15 MPs have resigned over what they say is a brutal clampdown on the protesters.
After we resigned, we formed an independent bloc. Our plan is to push to reform the whole political system. Look at the situation now and you will understand why it has to be imminent.
To enforce change, the protesters are mustering more people here in the capital and across the country. They hope that one day the president will heed their calls to stand down. Hashim Mahabara, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
Well, Barbara Bodine was the US ambassador to Yemen from 1997 to 2001. She joins me from Princeton, New Jersey. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us here on Al Jazeera. Now, you've been watching events in Yemen, I'm sure, fairly closely in recent weeks. Do you think that President Saleh can survive, or do you think he will be ousted fairly soon?
I honestly don't know, but the fact that these protests have gone on for 4 weeks, they seem to be growing in strength, certainly makes the president's position extraordinarily difficult. there have been, I think as we all know, a series of efforts to try to reach some sort of a political accommodation. None of them have been successful so far. But I think it would be imprudent to make a real prediction.
So, I mean,
if the demonstrations do continue, it does not look good for the president.
And he's been a long-time ally of the United States, and lots of money, American money, has been pumped into the country to try to sort of fight what's seen as the al-Qaeda risk there. How is the kind of that sort of situation being affected by what's going on the ground at the moment? Where does that money continue to go in? What happens?
Well, I think, right now that is a major concern of the U.S. government. It's a fairly new relationship. We've not been a major donor to Yemen over the years, but right now, it's very hard to get either the attention of the Yemeni security forces or the Yemeni government to continue to try to focus on al-Qaeda. And I think the concern that everyone has is that with all of these political and security distractions, al-Qaeda has a lot more running room to operate that they didn't have before, and that's extremely worrisome.
Were you surprised when Ali Abdullah Saleh sort of criticised the US and blamed the US and Israel for some of these protests? Quite an unusual move, wasn't it, for an ally?
I think those were probably, well, those are remarks that he has expressed an apology for, and I do think that they were intemperate, yes. It was unfortunate. It was unfortunate.
I mean, you talked a moment ago about the situation if it gets worse and what that could mean in terms of al-Qaeda. James Jones, the former White House National Security Advisor, has warned recently that Yemen's crisis could deepen the current vacuum of power in Yemen on which al-Qaeda has thrived. Is there anything that can be done to stop that? I mean, given that at the moment he doesn't seem to particularly be able to control the demonstrations, never mind the country, can anyone else play a part?
Well, I don't know. I don't really think so. I mean, as I said, the current political and security vacuum or distractions, however you want to characterize it, are very worrisome because it does increase al-Qaeda's running room. But there really aren't a lot of options. I mean, this would certainly not be a situation where we would send in foreign forces. Drones can't operate, and I would suspect that a lot of our training has been put on hold or at least been cut back. So unfortunately, no, we don't have any other real options at this time.
Okay, Barbara Bodine, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, hundreds of people are taking to the streets of Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. Some are protesting against the killing of 7 women shot by soldiers during a march last week. Those women were demonstrating against the incumbent leader, Laurent Gbagbo. Thousands have fled the ongoing violence. More now on our top story, and the UN is warning of a growing refugee crisis as hundreds of thousands of foreign workers try to flee Libya. In these latest pictures from the Tunisian border, scuffles can be seen breaking out amongst the migrants. Tunisia is struggling to cope with the